세계 속의 대한민국, 우리나라의 아름답고 감동적인 이야기를 전합니다. 휴면톡톡입니다. 아직도 미국 사람들은 한국 사람 하면 이 사건을 생각한다고 합니다. 특히 나이가 있는 미국 사람들은 절대로 한국인을 건들면 안 되는 이유로 이 사건을 꼽았다고 하는데요. 자식들에게 다른 아시안보다도 한국인을 우습게 보지 말라는 조언을 하는 경우가 많다고 합니다. 그 이유는 바로 몇십 년 전 있었던 사건이었는데요. 폭스TV에서 재조명한 다큐멘터리를 살펴보도록 하겠습니다. 그들의 눈에 비친 우리나라는 어떤 모습인지 요약본으로 정리해드립니다. 구독, 좋아요, 알림 설정은 영상 제작에 큰 힘이 됩니다.
Roof Korean or rooftop Korean is a word that comes to mind when Californians think of Koreans. Rooftop Korean is a word that describes the Korean people during the LA riots that occurred from April 29 to May 1992 in Los Angeles, California, USA. During the riot, most citizens and public authorities such as the police and fire departments were in panic, and Koreans who were in crisis formed their own vigilante group. The scene in which Korean immigrants who mainly ran laundromats and supermarkets formed a vigilante group and armed themselves with firearms to defend their stores from the mob and defended Koreatown was imprinted on many people. Loop Korean is a fairly old word because it is an exemplary example of the American constitutional idea that when the state abandons its citizens, the citizens must replace the role of the state. During the LA riots, the police and other public authorities failed to respond properly, causing the situation to spread out of control. In particular, the damage to the local Korean community became serious because the place where Koreans mainly lived was right in front of the black populated area. For example, according to an article in the LA Times on May, the owner of a gun shop said in an interview, "There were 4 police cars in the area, and I was honestly disappointed that they all ran away in less than a second as soon as I heard the gunshot." Banning, a documentary about the LA riots made in the 2010s, contains detailed testimony from David Ju, who was an employee at a gun store in Koreatown at the time. He said that at the time the riot broke out, his employer Richard Park, the owner of GM Bang, said there has been a shooting incident. "Can you help me?" When I contacted him, he said he came out without any hesitation. When they arrived at the scene and saw police cars blocking the scene and armed police officers stationed at the scene, they thought they had saved their lives, but as soon as the shootout began, the police quickly ran away, and in the end they had no choice but to protect the store themselves. In the interview above, he talks about it in a witty way, but at the time he said he was really scared even though he was defending himself by shooting. When a bullet flew near his head, he clearly felt fear, raising his arms to defend his head. However, because he was so scared, he responded even more firmly, firing, suppressing fire, even if anyone put their head out. As a side note, according to David Ju's testimony, the attack was actually caused by more Hispanic rioters than black people, who were the main subjects of the protest. In other words, it points out that rather than being real protesters, they were robbers from the lower classes of society who took advantage of the loopholes in the security vacuum caused by the protests. In the end, when there was no one to protect them in the vacuum of public power, the Korean store owners at the time organized a vigilante group, climbed onto the roof with guns and ammunition, and engaged in a siege with the rioters. The most famous video aired on the news is the scene where the owner and store clerks of Gaju Makep 4 are armed with rifles, shotguns, and Block 17s, guarding the streets and engaging in a gun shootout. When they showed strong security, even engaging in a shootout with guns on the rooftop, the rioters avoided them on their own. The stores that were not robbed and continued to operate normally despite the riots were those that were defended from the rooftops with guns. Although Koreans in America suffered great damage, they were quick to respond. At the time of the incident, Radio Korea, a Korean AM radio channel, broadcasted in real time when it received a tip saying there has been damage to US, so please go and help. A vigilante group made up of the Korean Youth Association and the Marine Corps Comrades Association went out to provide support and helped each other. It was an unintelligible communication to the rioters who did not know Korean. Due to this activity, Radio Korea, where singer Lee Jang-hee was the president at the time, received attention from American society, and George Herbert Walker Bush, who was president at the time, visited to offer consolation and gratitude. Roof Korean, who stopped the mob, became the the first Asian to receive a Hero Medal in the United States. In fact, at first there was a heated debate in the Korean community over whether or not the store should be kept. In order to protect yourself in a situation where gunfights are rampant, you have to respond with guns, but California is a region with strong gun control in the United States, so even among Koreans the public opinion that we could be arrested is conflicting with the public opinion that we have rights. Koreans were a mix of citizens and permanent residents, so they were not fully aware of their rights and they did not all have the same stance on possessing weapons. Therefore, Radio Korea, as mentioned earlier, needed considerable deliberation before broadcasting a call to fight, and by the time it was implemented, numerous buildings had already been burned, and many Koreans had been looted by blacks and Hispanics. It is a case that is highly praised in the United States, and it remains a very good memory, especially for American police officers who witnessed the vigilante activities in Koreatown at that time. Among public institutions at the time, the police and fire stations suffered the most damage, and the rioters even shot fire trucks that were dispatched after receiving a report of a fire to prevent them from putting out the fire. The reason why even people who had nothing to do with public power were attacked was because the rioters at the time were dangerous elements who were anxious to crush them wherever they could. In the end, fire departments at each level had to selectively dispatch equipment and personnel to defend themselves, and during this process Korean vigilantes came with guns to protect them. In other words, even the police stepped up to help when they were in a situation where they had to risk their own lives, and this created a positive perception. Therefore, the relationship between the LAPD and the Korean community is very good, and there are many cases where the Los Angeles Police Department represents the interests of the Korean community. After this incident, the presence of Koreans in the United States grew, and political circles, including the U.S. President, praised them. At the time, various races suffered evenly, but the reason why Koreans responded so strongly may be due to the business owner's position that he had to protect his own store, but it can be seen as a good reflection of the characteristics of Koreans, where most of the men served in the military. The LA riots can be said to be an incident in which the nation's security functions were paralyzed and the remaining public power abandoned the nation's citizens. Based on the people's right to bear arms given under the Second Amendment to the Constitution, Koreans who were thrown out of the country's protection by exercising their right to self-defense took on the role of national security on their own, and this involved quite complex issues unique to the United States. Koreans and the laws that apply to them are virtually forced to rely on public power unconditionally, and this is taken for granted. However, from the perspective of Americans who value freedom, if public power cannot protect individuals, it is also natural for the people to arm themselves and exercise their right to exist. Meanwhile, behind the scenes there is a contradictory background in which the emphasis on freedom makes it easy to violate the rights of others, resulting in a battle between the jungle and the jungle, with each person fighting for their own survival. And in order to overcome this, education must be provided to create a society where people can trust each other so that motivation does not arise in advance. However, the normal functioning of the American education system is deteriorating due to various economic, political and cultural problems. The reason Loop Korean is being focused on again in this unstable American society is because it shows that community autonomy can prevent a riot. Coming together as one is really important.
저는 로스앤젤레스에 살고 있는 한국계 미국인입니다. 옥상과 다른 초소를 지키고 있던 두 사람과 이야기를 나눴는데 그들 중 상당수가 일반 민간인이었기 때문에 놀랄 것입니다. 일부 상점, 주인, 식료품점, 점원, 요리사, 택시 운전사 등은 평범한 사람들입니다. 그들 대부분은 이민자였고 일부는 유학생이었습니다. 지금은 루프 코리안들을 칭찬하지만 폭동이 잠잠해진 직후 미국 경찰은 폭동에 저항한 한국인들을 체포했었다. 한인 지역 치안에 책임을 버리고 도망간 경찰들이 스스로를 지킨 시민들을 체포했다는 것은 정말 치욕적이다. 사건이 터지고 나서 얼마 되지 않아서 지휘본부가 세워졌다고 들었다. 지원 요청을 받고 지원군을 내보낼 수 있는 시스템이 갖춰지자 한국 사람들은 일사불란하게 움직였다. 전 국민이 군대를 다녀왔다는 것이 얼마나 큰 능력이 될 수 있는 건지 보여주는 사건이라고 생각한다. 한국 사람들은 기본 원칙은 위협 사격이고 절대로 조준사격을 하지 않았다고 한다. 자신들의 지역을 지키며 여기를 지나가지 말아라고 말했을 뿐 어떤 대응도 하지 않았다고 한다. 이런 점에서 나는 한국인들이 자랑스럽다. 미국이나 세계의 모든 사람이 이렇게 행동한다면 그곳은 더 안전한 곳이 될 것이다.
군대에서 훈련받은 것은 몸이 기억한다고 하죠. 절대적인 위기 상황에서 용기를 내어 대처한 한국인들의 모습에서 우리가 앞으로 나아가야 할 방향성이 보이는 것 같습니다. 시청해주셔서 감사합니다. 휴면톡톡이었습니다.